In the vast and mysterious lands of the Middle East, where history and faith intertwine, secrets lie buried for millennia, waiting to be discovered. Dear listener, this documentary takes us on a revealing journey through time and land, exploring some of the most significant archaeological finds that have illuminated the pages of the Bible, transforming the sacred text into a living testimony of historical events. Join us as we follow in the footsteps of the ancients, revealing the truth buried beneath layers of earth and time, and discover how archaeology and faith coincide in elucidating one of humanity's most influential and revered texts. Prepare to see the Bible in a new light as history comes to life in this exciting documentary about the archaeological discoveries that confirm its veracity. Before continuing, support us by liking this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And don't forget to activate the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you every time we upload a new video. Let's start. Archaeology is a discipline that takes years, decades, and even half-centuries. The painful work of digging and sifting large swaths of boulder and sandstone is followed by longer stretches of waiting, analyzing, and interpreting the discovered artifacts. But recent years have seen regular announcements of important developments and discoveries, some of them expected, but others quite surprising, that deepen and broaden our understanding of the world of the Bible. The Bible is the oldest and most historically accurate writing that has ever existed. There are more and more discoveries that support and prove that each of the stories and passages represented in this book are real. The following are the 9 most relevant stories of archaeological discoveries related to the Bible, and that made big headlines in the media due to their historical and documentary relevance to support and corroborate the biblical stories. Number 1. The inscription of Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate, also known in Spanish as Pontius Pilate, was a member of the equestrian order and 5th prefect of the Roman province of Judea between the years 26 and 36 after Christ, during the reign of Emperor Tiberius. The canonical Gospels present him as the executive responsible for the torture and crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. Possibly the most famous Roman governor in history, Pontius Pilate was practically unknown until his appearance in one of the most momentous episodes in the history of Christianity, the Passion and Death of Jesus. But beyond his presence in the Gospels, a few brief references from Roman historians and a handful of coins supposedly minted by the prefect, there is very little evidence that Pilate actually existed. This was the case until the discovery in 1961 of the Pilate stone, a piece of carved limestone with the name of Pontius Pilate inscribed on it. Italian archaeologist Antonio Frova and his team found the Pilate stone in an excavation of an ancient Roman theater in Caesarea, Israel, a building built by decree of King Herod the Great around the year 10 before Christ. The inscription is very significant because it is accepted as an archaeological find, an authentic 1st century Roman inscription with the name of Pontius Pilate. Although eroded by the passage of time, some fragments of the limestone inscription can be distinguished. From what archaeologists can read, it appears to be a dedicatory stone that says, "To the divine Augustus Tiberius, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea, dedicates this to him." The discovery corroborates what is stated in the scriptures, where Pontius Pilate is mentioned on several occasions. Number 2. Hezekiahs Tunnel. Hezekiah was the 13th king of the kingdom of Judah, son of King Ahaz. He reigned between the years 716 and 686 before Christ. He is one of the kings mentioned for the genealogy of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. Hezekiah was one of the kings called reformers because of the changes he made in his people. The Old Testament mentions that King Hezekiah ordered a tunnel to be dug from the springs of Gihon so that water could be diverted towards the city. This was a defensive measure taken to provide Jerusalem with water as Sennacherib's army approached to besiege the city. Let us read in the 2nd book of Chronicles, chapter 32, verse 30. This Hezekiah covered the springs of Gihon the Upper and led the water to the west of the city of David. and Hezekiah prospered in all that he did. King Sennacherib of Assyria sent a high official named Rabshakeh to intimidate the Jews. Shouting in Hebrew to the people on the walls, Rabshakeh tried to destroy the morale of the Jews and their will to resist. Considering the heat of the Middle Eastern climate, one can imagine how frightening his threat that the Jews would die of hunger and thirst implied, as the second book of Chronicles, chapter 32, verse 11 alludes to. Does not Hezekiah deceive you, to give you over to death, famine, and thirst, saying, "The Lord our God will deliver us out of the hand of the king of Assyria"? Now, but would it really be surrender or die of thirst? No, since King Hezekiah had previously arranged for his men to stop the waters of the springs outside the city. Thus, the besieging Assyrians would be hard-pressed to find enough water for themselves. So what water could the Jews possibly have when Hezekiah and the people were locked up like a bird in a cage, according to Sennacherib's boast? Yes, the Jews knew that there was plenty of water in the Gihon Spring Cave on the eastern slope of the city. That source was blinded or hidden so that the Assyrians would not know about it. However, Gihon was outside the walls of Jerusalem, so how could he keep the Jews alive? The Bible tells us, it says that Hezekiah stopped up the upper fountain of the waters of Gihon and kept them directed straight down along it, westward to the city of David. How did that? Through a water tunnel drilled into the solid rock. That tunnel is still there. Experts consider it one of the great engineering feats of antiquity. Today, visitors to Jerusalem can walk through this same tunnel, which Hezekiah's engineers used to divert the waters of the Gihon springs that normally flowed outside the city. The tunnel, about 533 meters long and built approximately in the year 701 before Christ. It is one of the great engineering wonders of the ancient world. Discovered in 1838 by the famous American archaeologist Edward Robinson, this tunnel revealed one of the secrets of its construction method, when an Arab boy found an ancient Hebrew inscription carved into one of its walls, which explained how two teams of men working from opposite ends dug simultaneously until they met in the middle. The inscription was later brought to Istanbul by order of the city's Ottoman rulers. The inscription reads as follows: "The tunnel has been completed while the diggers wielded their axes, each man towards his partner, and with 3 more cubits to dig, the voice of a man was heard calling for his partner. The diggers chopped towards each other, axe against axe, and the water gushed from the spring into the pond, a distance of 1,200 cubits. If the tunnel had been straight, it would have been 335 meters long. That is, it would have been 40% shorter. The exit of the tunnel leads to the Pool of Siloam, where Jesus sent the blind man to wash his eyes in its waters after having spit on the ground, making mud with the saliva and anointing it on his eyes. The blind man regained his sight as alluded to in the Gospel of John chapter 9. Number 3. Taylor's Prism. In the year 1830, a man named Robert Taylor found a clay cylinder that measured approximately 15 inches. It was the so-called Taylor Prism, which records the words of Sennacherib, who was the king of Assyria at that time. This prism of Sennacherib date of the year 700 before Christ, and it was made in ancient Assyria. The cuneiform writing in the Akkadian language that it contains refers to the Israelite king Hezekiah and the Assyrian king Sennacherib. Both appear in the biblical record of the second book of Kings, chapters 18 and 19, and also in the second book of Chronicles, and in the book of the prophet Isaiah. Now, in the inscription, the Assyrian king relates how he traps King Hezekiah in Jerusalem as if he were a bird in a cage. The prism-shaped piece was purchased from an antiques dealer in Baghdad in 1919 and is today in the Oriental Institute Museum at the University of Chicago. This is its complete content. As for Hezekiah the Jew, who did not submit to my yoke, I laid siege to 46 of his strong cities and innumerable villages in their vicinity, and conquered them by battering rams and siege engines. I took from them 200,150 people, young and old, male and female, as well as innumerable horses, mules, donkeys, camels, and large and small livestock, which I took from him and considered booty. Himself Hezekiah I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal residence, like a bird in a cage. The cities that I had taken by sack I detached from his country, and gave them to Mitinti, king of Ashdod, to Padi, king of Ekron, and to Silabel, king of Gaza. And so I diminished their territory. Hezekiah himself went by the terrible splendor of my majesty, and the Arabs and the mercenary troops that he had brought to reinforce Jerusalem, his royal city, abandoned him. Later he sent me to Nineveh, my stately city, in addition to 30 talents of gold, 800 talents of silver, precious stones, antimony, large blocks of red stone, beds inlaid with ivory, chairs inlaid with ivory, elephant hides, ebony wood, boxwood, and all kinds of valuable treasures, his daughters, concubines, musicians, and musicians. To deliver the tribute and render obedience like a slave, he sent his personal messengers. By comparing these words inscribed on the Prism and what the Bible declares, we can realize that it is exactly the same as what Sennacherib declared. Let us read in the second book of Chronicles, chapter 32, verse 1. After these things and this faithfulness, Sennacherib, king of the Assyrians, came and invaded Judah and encamped against the fortified cities, intending to conquer them. Now, the Bible says that Hezekiah gave as tribute 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. This payment is confirmed in the Prism of Sennacherib, although he claims that he received 800 talents of silver. Despite this payment, the Assyrian king's messengers stood before the walls of Jerusalem, mocked Jehovah God, and threatened his holy city. The Prism records how Sennacherib managed to subjugate several cities in the kingdom of Judah, but it does not say that he also did the same with Jerusalem. Why? In chapter 37, verses 33 and 34 of the book of the prophet Isaiah is the answer. The biblical story tells that through Isaiah, who was in Jerusalem, Jehovah said this about Sennacherib: "He shall not enter this city, nor shoot an arrow into it. He will not come before her with a shield, nor will he set up a bulwark against her. He will return by the way he came, and will not enter this city." Did Jehovah stop Sennacherib as promised? Of course, yes. That same night the angel of God struck down 185,000 Assyrians. Sennacherib withdrew and returned to Nineveh, where 2 of his own sons later killed him while he bowed before his god Nisroch. However, attempts have been made to give different explanations for the death of the 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. The possibility of an epidemic has been considered, such as that of a bubonic plague or another type of contagious disease. The first-century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus quotes the Babylonian priest and historian Berossus and says, "Sennacherib from the Egyptian expedition returned to Jerusalem, where he found the troops commanded by Rapsaces in great danger from the plague. God sent them a disease that, on the first night they laid siege to the city, killed 180,000 soldiers with their captains and centurions." As we have seen above, the Prism of Sennacherib does not record any of that. But the boastful tone that was common in the inscriptions of Assyrian rulers would make it very difficult for Sennacherib to record such a defeat. On the other hand, the historian Herodotus says that a flock of field mice fell during the night and gnawed their quivers, their bows, and also the bracelets of their shields, which made Sennacherib's army completely incapable of combat military action. Number 4. David's inscription, Tel Dan Stele. The Bible describes David as a man after God's own heart, and as a king who reigned for 40 years, firmly establishing the city of David and the Israelite kingdom that he inherited from his son Solomon. For archaeologists, however, the record is not so clear. Looking at evidence from excavations in modern Israel, some experts have argued that the Bible greatly exaggerated the historical significance of David. Some have even suggested that David is just a myth, heroic fiction, and nationalist folktale. Obviously, in David, we find a figure built substantially of romance, legend, and fine literary elaboration, wrote the British scholar Philip Davies. Danish scholar Niels Peter Lemche stated that It is quite likely that the stories about him are as historical as the legends about King Arthur. But after decades of debate, new discoveries are affirming David's historicity. This growing body of evidence, ranging from monumental inscriptions to remains of ancient buildings, strongly supports the biblical account. The first breakthrough came in 1993, when a team led by archaeologist Avraham Biran discovered a stone fragment in Tel Dan, northern Israel, with an inscription that reads, "House of David." The inscription is in ancient Semitic and is from the 9th century before our era. Everything indicates that it was part of a monument that the Arameans built to boast of their victories over Israel. An article published in Bible History Daily stated, "Some questioned the inscription House of David. However, most biblical scholars and archaeologists readily accepted that the Tel Dan stele was the first solid evidence that King David of the Bible is a historical figure." Number 5. The Mesa Steely or Moabite Stone. The Moabite Stone, also known as the Mesa Steely, is a black basalt monument just over a meter high with Moabite writing. It dates back to the year 832-5 before Christ, and it was found in August 1868 by Frederick Augustus Klein, a German missionary from Jerusalem in the lands of ancient Moab, exactly in Dibon, Jordan. It is exactly 124 centimeters high, 79 centimeters wide, and 36 centimeters thick. It refers to biblical characters such as the Israelite king Omri and the Moabite king Mesha. The 34-line inscription, the longest recovered from ancient Moab, was written in the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. It was erected by Mesha as a record and remembrance of his victories in his revolt against the kingdom of Israel, which he undertook after the death of its ruler, Ahab. Let us read in the second book of Kings, chapter 3, verses 4 and 5. "Then Mesha, king of Moab, was the owner of cattle, and he paid the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams with their fleeces. But when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel." As we mentioned before, King Mesha of Moab erected the Moabite stele in honor of his god Chemosh to commemorate the occasion when Mesha freed himself from the domination of Israel, which he says had lasted 40 years and had been permitted by Chemosh, because he was angry against his land. It is generally believed that this Moab revolt is related to the events narrated in the 3rd chapter 3 of the 2nd book of Kings. On the monument, Mesha boasts of being very religious, of having built cities, of having made a road, and of having won a victory over Israel. He gives all the credit for this to his god Chemosh. As might be expected, the defeat of Mesha and the sacrifice of his own son, which are reported in the Bible, are omitted from this inscription in which Mesha glorifies himself. Many places that Mesha says he captured are mentioned in the Bible, including Medeba, Adarat, Nebo, and Jahaz. Thus, the stele supports the accuracy of the biblical accounts. However, it is exceptional that Mesha used the Tetragrammaton YHWH, the name of the God of Israel, which some translations of the Bible translate as Yahweh or Jehovah. In line 18 of the inscription, Mesha presents these boasts: "I took from Nebo, the vessels of Yahweh, and dragged them before Chemosh." Outside of the Bible, this is probably the oldest record of the use of the divine name. Number 6. The Cyrus Cylinder. Known today as the Cyrus Cylinder, this ancient document has now been recognized as the first human rights document in the world. It is translated into the 6 official languages of the United Nations, and its provisions are analogous to the first 4 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Cyrus Cylinder is a document issued by Cyrus the Great, consisting of a clay cylinder inscribed in Akkadian cuneiform script. The cylinder was created in the year 539 before Christ, by order of Cyrus the Great, when he took Babylon from the hands of Nabonidus, putting an end to the Neo-Babylonian Empire. This cylinder was found in the year 1879 by an expedition of the British Museum in the temple of the god Marduk in Babylon, present-day Iraq. The piece is covered by 45 lines of Akkadian cuneiform writing, in which the conquest of the city by Cyrus is celebrated with pomp and reverence. Currently, it is on display at the British Museum in London. This cylinder is known for its historical importance and its relationship to the events narrated in the Bible, specifically in the context of the return of the Jews to Jerusalem after the Babylonian captivity. Below are some key points about the Cyrus cylinder. Number 1. Content of the registration. The inscription on the cylinder is a decree attributed to Cyrus the Great, granting freedom to several peoples who had been conquered by the Babylonians. In particular, the liberation of the Jews, who had been taken into captivity in Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar, is mentioned. Number 2. Liberation of the Jews. The cylinder of Cyrus is considered an important archaeological testimony of the policies of Cyrus the Great and the policy of religious tolerance of the Persians. This cylinder records Cyrus's policy of allowing conquered peoples to return to their homelands and restore their places of worship. In the case of the Jews, this aligns with the biblical narrative. In the book of Ezra, chapter 1, verses 1 to 4, it is mentioned that Cyrus issued an edict allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. This edict resembles the policy reflected in the Cyrus cylinder. For Jews, this document is especially significant because it supports the idea of a permitted return to Jerusalem and the restoration of their temple, pivotal events in their history. Let's see what it says in Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. In the first year of Cyrus king of Persia, that the word of the Lord through the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus king of Persia, and he proclaimed it by word of mouth and also in writing throughout his kingdom, saying, "Thus says Cyrus king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you of his people, let God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is the God, which is in Jerusalem. And to everyone who is left, wherever he lives, let the men of his place help him with silver, gold, goods, and livestock, as well as free will offerings for the house of God, which is in Jerusalem." The cylinder, the biblical texts, and the narrative of the historian Herodotus are firm evidence that Cyrus was tolerant in his campaigns, both with the Jewish people whom he let go and with the Babylonian population whose gods and temples he respected. Number 7. The Pool of Siloam. In 2004, on the southern edge of Jerusalem, a drainage pipe burst. Consequently, the municipality sent construction workers to repair the damage. However, when this kind of thing happens in the city of David, not only are builders sent in, archaeologists are also sent. They hear the digging and the shovels, realizing that something is not right. They sent everyone outside and revealed that they discovered a series of steps made of ancient stones, thousands of years old. And they realized that those stairs led to the Pool of Siloam. The Pool of Siloam, located in the southern part of the city of David and in the area of the walls of Jerusalem National Park, is an archaeological and historical site of national and international importance. The pond was first built about 2,700 years ago as part of Jerusalem's water supply system in the century 8 before Christ. During the reign of King Hezekiah, as described in the Bible in the second book of Kings, chapter 20, verse 20, the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and all his might, and how he made the pool and the conduit and brought the water into the city, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? The Pool of Siloam served as a reservoir for the waters of the Gihon Spring, which were diverted through an underground water tunnel, which is why it was already considered one of the most important areas of Jerusalem at the time of the First Temple. Due to its location and importance, the Pool of Siloam was renovated and expanded 2,000 years ago at the end of the Second Temple period. It is believed that millions of pilgrims used it as a ritual bath, mikveh, before going up to the temple through the city of David. According to the Gospel of John, It was at the Pool of Siloam where Jesus healed the blind man. Let's read John chapter 9, verse 11. He answered and said, "The man called Jesus made mud, anointed my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash yourself.' And I went and washed and received sight." The discovery of the Pool of Siloam represents a decisive moment in the field of biblical archaeology. The American newspaper Los Angeles Times reported on the remarkable discovery. Scholars have said that there was no such Pool of Siloam and that John was using a religious fantasy to explain the matter, said James Hamilton Charlesworth of Princeton Theological Seminary and an expert on the New Testament. Now we have found the Pool of Siloam, exactly where John said it was. A gospel that was believed to be pure theology now proves to be based on history, he stated August 9, 2005. Thus, this is an extraordinary example of the historical accuracy of the Bible, which refutes the opinion of many skeptics who had considered the Pool of Siloam a religious invention. Number 8. The Hittite Tablets. The Bible was questioned for many years by those who claimed that it contained names of people and places that never existed, among them the nation of the Hittites. A town of legend, which only appeared mentioned in the Old Testament, became a reality when at the end of the 19th century the first vestiges appeared, which took shape in 1906, and 3,000 years after the Bible declared it, Hugo Winkler discovered 10,000 clay tablets that documented the history of the Hittite nation. In addition, it was also known that that area was the capital of the Hittite nation. The Old Testament names them as Hittim, in the Reina Valera version translated as Hittite. Some known references among the more than 50 are found in Joshua, where the confederation of peoples, including the Hittites, is mentioned in their fight against Israel. Let's read Joshua chapter 11, verse 3. "And to the Canaanite that was on the east and on the west, to the Amorite, to the Hittite, to the Perizzite, to the Jebusite in the mountains, and to the Hivite at the foot of Hermon in the land of Mizpah." David's army had Hittites among its ranks. Let's read in the first book of Samuel, chapter 26, verse 6. "Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, 'Who will go down with me to Saul in the camp?' And Abishai said, 'I will go down with you.'" The Hittites are also mentioned in the times of King Joram, son of Ahab. Let us read in the second book of Kings, chapter 7, verse 6. "For the Lord had caused in the camp of the Syrians to be heard the roar of chariots, the noise of horses, and the noise of a great army. And they said to each other, 'Behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come against us.'" When Bedřich Hrozný deciphered its writing in 1915, it gave way to historical knowledge of customs, laws, trade, etc., of a people until then only known through mentions in the Bible, and that textual criticism criticized as allegories. Thus, once again the veracity of the Bible was proven. Number 9. Deir Allah Inscription. According to the biblical book of Numbers, chapters 22 to 24, Balaam son of Beor hired himself as a prophet. In fact, his name appears in 8 different books of the Bible, including letters from the Christian writers Peter and Jude. Balaam lived in the 15th century before Christ. In the upper part of the Euphrates Valley, he allowed himself to be hired by Balak, king of Moab, who wanted Balaam to pronounce curses on the nation of Israel. Now, was Balaam a historical figure or merely a Jewish invention? In 1966, when the Dutch Archaeological expedition was excavating the site of Tal Deir Allah Jordan, inscriptions on pieces of plaster came to light. One of them refers to the prophet Balaam, son of Beor, a well-known character in the Bible. After being carefully collected and infrared photographs taken, they were sent to the Central Research Laboratory for Art and Science Objects in Amsterdam, in order to restore for later translation and interpretation at the Palestinian Archaeological Institute of Rijksuniversiteit in Leiden. According to the evidence, the inscriptions were dated to around the year 800 before Christ, with a margin of correction of 70 years more or 70 years less. From the different plaster fragments, the specialists formed two groups or combinations that were mounted and framed, currently being exhibited in the Amman Archaeological Museum in Jordan. Although the text has only been partially reconstructed, the title of the first combination, made in red, reads, Inscription of Balaam the son of Beor, the man who is a soothsayer of the gods. Next, the inscription seems to indicate that Balaam has a divine vision in his dreams, in which he warns the people of a catastrophe that the goddess Shagar will send. And the gods came to him by night, and spoke to him according to the word of him, and they spoke to Balaam, the son of Beor, as follows, he will do. Then Balaam rose up to the next morning, while I was crying. Yes, I was crying. Then Elika came to him. Why are you crying? Then he said to them, Sit down. I will tell you what the goddess Shagar will do. You can break the rays of the sky in your cloud, there may be darkness. It is interesting to highlight the connection of the text found in Deir Allah and the expressions of Balaam's oracles in the biblical narrative. The inscription found reads, Balaam son of Beor, coinciding with Numbers chapter 22 verse 5. Therefore he sent messengers to Balaam the son of Beor at Pethor, which is by the river in the land of the children of his people, to call him. Likewise, the general context of the inscription is within the religious vision of the area. We are faced with the obvious relationship between Israel's neighboring peoples and their expressions and experiences. It must be considered that if a clear historical reference, outside the Bible in the 8th century before Christ, recognizes and remembers Balaam, likewise the biblical characters related to him in his time, such as Balak, Moses, Joshua, and many others, indirectly they are also recognized. Dear listener, these inscriptions are hundreds of years closer to the events described in the Bible than the oldest manuscripts existing today. They are further proof that adds to the evidence that the Bible presents a reliable record of ancient history. Since, as it says in 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 16 and 17, all scripture is inspired by God and is useful for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly equipped for every good work. And so we come to the end of this video, and we hope it has been useful to you. See you in the next video.